Welcome, everyone, to Landmark Difference Makers. Today, we're going to be interviewing Dave Benjamin, who is a year-round Great Lakes surfer and the co-founder of the Great Lakes Surf Rescue Project. A survivor of a near-death experience while surfing in Lake Michigan in 2010, Dave turned his ordeal into a mission, founding the Great Lakes Surf Rescue Project to reduce drownings through training and public awareness. We're really looking forward to learning about his unique leadership insights and the profound impact of making promises that both quite literally save lives. Dave, welcome.
Thanks for having me tonight. Really appreciate it.
It's really, really great to have you here. I want to start out with just a question, which is, you know, the Great Lakes Surf Rescue Project, the catalyst for it was a near drowning experience you had. Would you just share a little bit with us about that and the impact that it had on you?
Yeah, sure. First, let me go back a second. So I'm the co-founder of the Great Lakes Surf Rescue Project. I founded it with another person named Bob Pratt. He's a retired fire marshal from East Lansing, Michigan, and water safety expert. And I'll circle back to him in a moment. But I learned late in life that you could surf Lake Michigan. And growing up, watching old movies like North Shore and then Laird, with Riding Giants and other like surf movies, I was always kind of fascinated by it. Parents took me to California and Florida as growing up, and then I'd even lived in California for almost 2 years, right near Huntington Beach. So I spent a lot of time in the surf boogie boarding, but I never, got the courage back then to, actually, get a surfboard or take some lessons. I didn't want to be, the goofy guy from Chicago, learning how to surf and getting in everybody's way. So I asked somebody one time and he's just like, go over there with the boogie boarders and get some swim fins. And that's just what I did when I was in California. But the company downsized, and then I was without a job out there and stuck it out for a little bit, moved back to Chicago, and I was 2 miles away from some really great surf and never surfed, and now I'm landlocked by, over 2,500 miles or more to get to surf. And I was driving home in a winter storm in Chicago, and I see this like kind of like a vintage station wagon with the surfboard strapped to the top of it, and had a bumper sticker that said Third Coast Surf Shop. And I was just like, Google was just kind of starting. This is like 2007, 2008, and it was actually a surf shop in New Buffalo, Michigan, and that's how I got my start in this, surfing at least. But for the incident that I had, it was December 26, 2010. So it was the day after Christmas. Didn't have to work. It was a very cold morning. We had some light north winds, 15, 20 miles an hour coming down the lake. And generally what we do is we get up for dawn patrol. You get up, at the crack of dawn to go hit the beach. And, I don't know, 6 to 7 a.m. out in the water surfing. And as I'm out there, we're catching a few waves. They're really nice waves were coming through, but then the ice started to fill up the lineup where you're catching the waves, which can be very dangerous if you were to get hit by a chunk of ice on the head, when the wave is closing out on you. I was starting to think it's probably time to get out because more and more ice flow is starting to come in. Initially it was slush balls, but now some icebergs are coming in. Wasn't really paying attention, and looked over my shoulder, and there's a big wave. It's peaking up, and I committed late. And what happens is when you commit late, I dip the nose, which stops the nose, and the wave pushed over, catapulted me. I landed flat on my back, got the wind knocked out of me. The wave closes out of me, pushes me to the bottom. I feel my leash to my surfboard get ripped off my ankle, and I immediately panicked because it's the first time I've ever been without my flotation device. And as I'm trying to get back up to the surface, because I want to get back to my board as fast as possible, I know the waves will be pushing it away. But as I'm getting back up to the surface, another wave is closing out and pushing me back to the bottom. And, again, it's just struggling, just immense panic. And I was, at this point where I was exhausted and realizing this is not how I'm gonna, survive this, and kind of writing myself off. And it was in the moment when I quit fighting to get to the surface. and I relaxed and accepted that this is going to be the fate, where I'm wearing a 6 millimeter wetsuit, which actually has some buoyancy, and it just floated me back up to the surface when I wasn't struggling to get to the surface. And when I got to the surface, I was able to breathe, clear a little bit of water that I had inhaled, kind of was choked a little bit, and realizing that, I could probably survive this by staying at the surface. I have this wetsuit on, I've been in colder water, colder air temperatures, but my surfboard is getting destroyed on the rock wall. And at the same time, I'm in a current going out away from shore along the rock wall. It's called the structural current. And, now I got to figure out how to get out of this current, because the waves are pushing me towards the rock wall, the current's pulling me further out, and it's kind of not the direction I want to be going at all. But the long story short was I just backstroked far enough away from the wall, which is actually like going out to open water, which would be the opposite of a person's instinct, and then got the waves to push me back to shore. And that's when I crawled out, realizing I just had a really, really close call that, I ran up the pier to see if I could see, where my surfboard was. But by the time I had gotten up there, I saw the tail end of it. The leash was stuck in a rock, and it was just getting pounded. A portion of it did eventually float to shore, and I took that home. And it was shortly after that incident that I was a head coach in a self-expression and leadership program. And in that program, everyone takes on a community project. And so my community project was to do a surfboard rescue techniques class, because I was like hearing a lot about surfers making rescues, and injuries happen, and sometimes drownings were fatal when people were surfing in areas. So that was like the initial like target that we were looking at. And I started networking. Back then we didn't have Facebook or Instagram or TikTok. It was a surfing forum page on the Third Coast Surf Shop website, where each Great Lake had its own surfing forum, and then there's threads within threads, for like, buying surfboards, for wetsuit gear, etc. And I started hearing people talking about, their drowning incidents. So I think I created a thread, or everyone started, directing me in the direction of Bob Pratt, being the leading water safety expert on Lake Michigan. And so we kind of joke about it. We had one phone call, several emails, and then the first time we ever met, we say we're one of those successful online relationships. So we chatted on the thread and through emails for several months. He's going to be the subject matter expert and lead the presentation. I'm going to be the organizer. The first time we met was in the parking lot of a hotel in St. Joseph, Michigan, where we had a room in the basement to do the presentation. And initially we had about 15 people that registered. They were all surfers, but we, gave the option for it to be open to the public. And then we had police officers, firefighters, water rescue team, dive team, and a couple members of Coast Guard and Department of Natural Resources also showed up. So, we had close to 50 people. So for us, it seemed like, a huge success. Like, we had a wider audience than we ever anticipated, because again, we promoted it as, teaching surfers how to use their surfboard as a rescue device and learn about the Great Lakes dangerous currents. And from there, that was the first presentation in June of 2011. And now we've done over 1,200 presentations in 7 of the 8 Great Lakes states.
Well, I want to definitely talk more about the presentations and how the project has grown. I think your introductions left people with a couple questions that I'm going to try and ask on their behalf. One is, what are you doing surfing in an ice-filled lake in the middle of winter? What's the appeal of that? Why do people do it?
Well, if you want to surf, your options are buy, airfare tickets, hotels, traveling thousands of miles, to warm tropical locations and surf. Or I drive 30 miles to the south end of Lake Michigan, anywhere from Chicago, Northwest Indiana, Southwest Michigan, I'm 30 to 45 minutes away from 15 different surf spots, right? And based on my budget, driving 30 miles 3, 4, or 5 times a week is more affordable than taking 1 or 2 surf vacations per year. So for me, it was somewhat economical. And then you do meet kind of the craziest, hardcore group of people that are dedicated to doing this. I mean, some guys have been doing this since, the 70s, 80s, and 90s, depending on where you're surfing. So there is like this kind of, sub surf culture,
And
right?
the conditions for surfing tend to be better in the wintertime.
Yeah. So the physics of it is, cold falls and heat rises. So when you have colder air over warmer water and you put wind behind it, it's a low pressure. You get like more wind friction. In addition to that, when the water gets colder, it's more dense. So we get better, shaped waves in the wintertime. So we'll surf it, all the way up until it freezes. And then even after that, we get mild temperatures rising up. We might get some areas that were iced in, the ice moves out with the wind, and then the surf comes in. And
For people that don't live in the Great Lakes region, I think it might be hard for them to imagine the
yeah.
kinds of conditions that you find on the Great Lakes. Those of us that live around them, like
Mhm.
myself, I live in Chicago, they're ocean-like. And but they also behave differently. And one of the things that really came as a surprise to me in the researching prior to our interview is the number of drownings that happen in Lake Michigan specifically. Is there something about Lake Michigan that uh, leads to that?
There's several factors that get noted quite often. It's a high population density. It's also tourist destination. And then the north and south configuration of Lake Michigan from north to south is about 307 miles long. And from east to west, it's about 118 miles wide. So it's north-south configuration. When we start getting the northerly winds blowing from the north end to the south end, the highest population and tourist destinations will start getting hit with surf, especially in August through October. So sometimes, June and July might be, only surf 1 or 2 days. This year, there's actually been a lot of surf this summer, but especially August when the air or the water temperature is getting up to the 80s and you get like a mild cool front, 75, 78 degrees with north winds behind it or west winds, we're going to get a lot of waves and dangerous currents.
And those are the same conditions that actually create the greatest hazard for the uh,
For swimmers, yeah. Um, in addition to that, if we compare ocean waves to Great Lakes waves, ocean waves may be stirred up by a storm that's 2 or 3,000 miles offshore. So the local weather might not impact the actual surf, the waves that are coming in. But with the Great Lakes, it's wind on the water now. But one special thing to note about this is that, say in the ocean, say if there's a wave every 15 seconds. So the crest of one wave to the crest of the next wave is 15 seconds. Now, the Great Lakes, we might get a wave every 3 seconds. So if you're in the ocean and there's a 3 foot wave every 15 seconds, if you get into a little bit of trouble, you wipe out or, you get knocked over by a wave, you have 15 seconds to recover until the next wave. In Lake Michigan, if it's a 3 foot wave hitting you every 3 seconds and it doesn't stop because the wind is blowing on it now. So even though we might get smaller waves in the Great Lakes, we get a higher frequency of waves, a shorter swell period, higher frequency. So it can be more turbulent. And then another thing that we know is that nationwide, even worldwide, water safety is not common sense. People will often say that they know how to swim and they assume that that's water safety. They can't understand how someone who knew how to swim, could have a drowning incident. But the reality is that The standard, not standard, but the statistic that gets put out a lot is 66% of all fatal drowning victims knew how to swim. So we need to look at that. It's not common sense to know that swimming is an endurance sport. You have to train for it. But when we put it in the context, like knowing how to run doesn't mean you could run a marathon. Knowing how to swim doesn't mean you could survive the marathon of a drowning incident. So we need to train for it, prepare for it, have a survival strategy for it. And then when we're looking at survival strategies, back in, I believe it was 2011, there was a Great Lakes Water Safety Conference in Gaylord, Michigan. There was like a group participation, like a brainstorming part of it. And one of the groups came up with a survival strategy: flip, float, and follow. So flip over on your back and you float to keep your head above water, to calm yourself down from the panic of drowning and conserve your energy, and then follow a safe path out of the water. We've been advocating that since then. If we put it in the context of, if your clothes catch on fire, the survival strategy is stop, drop, and roll. The reason why we have that survival strategy is because if you run, your instinct is to run away from the flames, you fuel the flames, which makes it much worse. So if you do the opposite of your instinct, you stop, you drop, you roll, you smother the flames. An ordered task has a psychological benefit to alleviate panic. It's not common sense to know that the first stage of drowning is panic, and it's your overreaction to the situation that a person, again, fight to survive. So you need to do the opposite. If you're struggling in water over your head, you need to roll over on your back and float, get your chest high to the water, get your head as high as you can, get some deep breaths. Also, if someone is panicking, they will be exhaling more than they're inhaling. Or if they're in water, they might be choking and they can't breathe at all. And but when you're exerting your energy, when you can't breathe, you exhaust yourself very quickly. But if you are able to breathe and you're hyperventilating, you're exhaling more than you're inhaling. So you're actually decreasing your buoyancy and you're increasing your panic level. So again, if you could roll over, get a couple of deep breaths, fill those lungs, it's going to increase your buoyancy and decrease some of the panic because you're able to breathe and stay at the surface. And when we say floating, easier said than done. We don't mean you're floating directly, your toes are out of the water. I mean, some people are good floaters. I've learned to float like that now. But for some people, they say they can't float, that, would be impossible for them. We want them to consider it like balancing. You're laying back, you're getting your chest to the water, your head's up high, your arms are out, and you're like, paddling, like balancing yourself, and your feet are doing a little bit of a flutter kick, and it might be a combination of you go vertical, tread water, and then you lay back every now and then. You got to pace yourself to stay at the surface.
There's one other thing that I understand about the southern end of Lake Michigan in particular is because it's so sandy, the wave activity creates sandbars, and water will accumulate on the shore side of the sandbar and eventually have to break through the sandbar, and it creates its own current. Is that right?
Yeah, that's the traditional ocean style rip current. The waves are piling on the shoreline. They have to recede. They hit the sandbar. They go parallel to the shore until they, create a trough in the sandbar, and you might get a long current of water flowing out. But now we need to consider that's often described for the ocean style rip currents, where we have a swell period, which is much longer. When we have these, 3-second wave periods, we call it more of a flash rip current, where it's more of like a checkerboard pattern, because there are sandbars along the shoreline, parallel to the shoreline, but you might get an opening in a sandbar and then it closes up. So it could be something where you're standing on a sandbar, it opens up and pulls out, but then it closes, but now you're in water over your head. It doesn't pull you. It might pull you only 10 or 15 feet. It just has to pull you in water over your head, and then you panic and you go vertical and do the signs of drowning, and it happens rather quickly. So that's one of the things we need to educate people on. When we look at these waves, especially in the summertime when they're all rolling on the beach with the onshore winds, they're never ending. You don't see one long, churning water or sea foam or debris moving out. It's breaking everywhere, and you can get rip currents that open and close, more like a checkerboard pattern in some ways.
Earlier you said that 65% of the people that are involved in fatal drownings know how to swim. Is there a profile or several profiles of the people that are victims of drowning?
Yeah, and when we do our presentations, we look at all of the we look at all the leading research and statistics from the leading organizations like World Health Organization, Center for Disease Control, American Red Cross, um, a couple other organizations, United States Life Saving Association, and we break it down so we can understand who's drowning most, when, where, and why. And according to the Center for Disease Control, drowning is a leading cause of all forms of death for children under the age of 5. So more than car accidents, more than disease or falls or any other injury, it's drowning. And when we look at children under the age of 1, bathtubs is the leading body of water where drowning may happen. So it seems like, wait, what do you mean? You know, a parent's or a caregiver is giving a child a bath, they're in a bath seat, and what might seem like a mild distraction turns into 2-3 minutes. And if a child were to slip underwater, they can't cry out for help. So if someone's giving a child a bath and the doorbell rings, it's the Amazon package, you have to take the child with you or just ignore the package. Because again, if you go get your package off the porch, you put it on the table, it's natural to now open up these packages and pull out contents, and several minutes go by. And one thing I want to say about this is I have 3 children, which are now 30, 22, and 14. And for each one of them, they're all 8 years apart, but for each one of them, we went to birthing classes. And the first one was Lamaze, and the second 2 were birthing classes. And never ever once did they ever say that drowning is a leading cause of death for children under the age of 5 and the bathtub safety. But what they did make sure that we, had was specialized training for infant carrier seats. And when we left the hospital with them, you're escorted to the vehicle to make sure that it's properly installed. So we need to take that level of care of educating parents about the drowning hazards. For children 1 to 5, backyard access to water is the leading body of water where drowning may happen. So is there a pool in the backyard or a hot tub, a retention pond adjacent to the property? Do the neighbors have water in their backyard? So we need to understand that if we're supervising young children in a house and when they go missing, we lose track of them, we should check the backyard access to water first, because they have a natural tendency to go from crawling to walking to opening doors to exploring backyards. And if they were to get in trouble, they can't cry out for help. Children 5 to 14, drowning is the second leading cause of accidental death, second only to car accidents in the nation as a whole. It's the 5th leading cause. So it's a huge problem that very few people have any knowledge of. They all say that they know how to swim, but they don't know the research and the statistics. Going further, deeper into these statistics, 80% of all drowning victims are male. So 4 out of 5 drowning victims are male. And that's because males are more likely to take risk, more susceptible to peer pressure, more likely to overestimate their ability. And when it gets to water, it gets a little worse. There was an American Red Cross report, and they did nationwide testing and surveying, and they had females estimate their swimming ability and test them on it. Did the same thing with males, estimate your swimming ability, let's test you on it. Females will estimate their swimming ability with almost 100% accuracy, which means they're far less likely to get in trouble in the water, where the flip side, males will overestimate their swimming ability. So males have this natural tendency to be risk takers and peer pressure. They're daring their friends to do things. They naturally overestimate their abilities. And when they get to water, they unknowingly double down 50%. And again, this is not widely taught, the psychological differences between males and females in schools. And a lot of times they're just hearing it for the first time when we're doing a water safety presentation. So again, we need to talk to the males to not dare your friends to jump into the deep end of the pool or swim out to the swim buoy, because even if they can't swim, they still might try. And that could be a leading factor of, males and drowning. And then in addition to that, we'll talk about a Safe Kids Worldwide study where in 2018 it came out, and that was the first time ever that open water became the leading body of water nationwide where all drownings are happening. It's 43%. All the years before, pools were the leading body of water, but pools have become safer with pool and spa industries, rules, regulations, permits, making sure that pools have a self-closing, self-locking perimeter fence, and the gate closes and locks, having motion detectors, having ring cameras. So pools have become safer, public pools having lifeguards. But the open water is still the big, vast unknown. And that was updated this year by the Center for Disease Control, that open water drownings is now 62% of all drownings nationwide. So
Hmm.
again, we need to start shifting our focus now on open water hazards and education.
Well, let's talk about that uh, focus for a moment.
Mhm.
How many how many uh, how many safety classes have you conducted to date?
Overall, like all forms of presentations and training we've done, it's over 1,200.
One of the things that you mentioned was the training that parents have in car seats.
Mhm.
And a car seat is something that you use almost on a daily basis when your children are of a certain age.
Yeah.
People don't go to open water very often. So
No.
the the repetition of doing the safety practice isn't there. And one of the things that, it's a massive undertaking. It's audacious, this commitment to safety. And one of the things I'm curious about, you mentioned that, you were a coach in the self-expression leadership program when you created this. For
Mhm.
people that are listening, the self-expression leadership program, as Dave said, is a program where people create a project to go out in their community and make a difference. Um, but I'm curious what training you've had at Landmark has made a difference in this audacious level of outreach you're doing.
I mean, it's kind of never ending to nail it down to one, but it's, mantras like if not me, then who? Want plus action equals results. And if there's something you want, you have to take actions for it and then assess the results and then, reevaluate, creating specific measurable results for, those things that you want. um having a lot of conversations, so like enrollment conversations, getting something where someone's touched, moved, and inspired by something, and registration is the request for them to take an action. So really all of these distinctions factor into pretty much everything we're doing on a daily basis. A lot of failing,
Yeah.
which I mean, there was like, a lot of conversations like, if you're not failing, then you're not, taking actions, right? You need to go out there and fail fast and fail again, because, you're not measured by the success, you're measured really by the amount of failures that you take to get to that success. And, so again, it's just something that you roll into on a daily basis. Um, Not always like with perfection, but it's we're you'd be surprised, but it's like there's like a dark side of water safety.
Hmm.
It really should be something so simple, right? Water safety. But we will get resistance from national parks, state parks, city parks, because again, the blanket statement is water safety is not common sense. It's not common sense for the average beachgoer, but it's not common sense for the average, city council member or the state legislator. So you have to have enrollment conversation to explain the benefits, the cost assessments, the possibility of saving lives versus like, this is just continuing to be, a bigger problem. So, and we're at different levels of different stages with, different national parks, different city parks, state parks. We have water safety task forces that are in multiple cities at multiple levels. So sometimes they kind of get a saturation point where they fizzle out a little bit, because we have winter time and it's summertime is like the hot time. And it is something that, you have to continuously, enroll yourself in doing. I'll be honest, I've quit this 1,000 times over the
Yeah.
last
Yeah.
14 years. There comes a point where you do need to take a step back and take a break, but then something happens and you're like, okay, well, I'm right back in this. The only person
Well,
who didn't quit
I
was
think
me.
it's important for people to know this isn't your profession. You have your own uh, You have your own business that has nothing to do with this.
And I've actually, let the business suffer quite a bit because I'll take spring and summer, actually sometimes winter, spring and summer, traveling, doing presentations. We have some funding, but it's minimal. Um, but I work as a commercial residential painter, and if I was running my business like full steam, like other contractors I know, they're out there pounding the pavement to do estimates every single day. And I'm not even doing that. I get calls, I can fill my schedule, but it also gives me freedom to take off. So like this summer, we went to Ashtabula and Pontiac, Ohio. We were up in Frankfort, Michigan, Leadington, Michigan, down in Northwest Indiana. But I mean, we've been bouncing around from Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, Michigan, and Ohio most of this summer doing public presentations and lifeguard training and some first responder training. And then in the mix of that, the family beach days turns into, I'm the volunteer lifeguard at the beach. And this summer so far, we've had 4 rescues.
Wait,
Where
you've participated in 4?
Yes. And last summer we had 15, right? And then these are just the family beach days. And this summer was pretty much luck because we were in Frankfort, Michigan. We got rained out up there on our last day, so we were coming home early. We stopped in Leadington, and I was just doing a bunch of filming because there's a river mouth that goes out into Lake Michigan where there was a drowning a couple weeks earlier. We were shooting a lot of video to, so we can put it together for like an educational video. And as we're leaving, 3 young girls go sprinting down the beach past us. They go right to where the river mouth is, and 2 of the youngest girls go right into the current. And now I'm running back. I'm asking parents, "Are these your kids?" And yelling at the kids to try to get out of the water. And luckily, I didn't have to get in by the time that we were there. But the youngest one was drowning. She was being pulled out, and her bigger sister was in like chest deep water, was able to grab her and then kind of pull her to where they could both stand up. But
Hmm.
it was like seconds away from turning into a tragedy. And then the next day, coming home, we took 2 vehicles up there, but my son and grandson, we ran out of gas coming, well, not literally, but almost. We were at the last 12 miles on the dashboard. What I was saying we had left. But we just pulled off in Portage, Indiana, and got gas. And I got my son and grandson. We got the surf gear in my truck, and I'm like, well, I know there's some wave activity. You want to go take a quick look? Portage Lakefront and Riverwalk, Indiana Dunes National Park. And again, it's a national park. There's no beach hazard signage. There's one life ring on the beach where there should be like 4 or 5. No hazard warnings. Weighs 2-3 feet. And we were there for 2 hours. But while I'm there, I'm looking down at one end of the beach because I see there's 2 girls in the water. They're out near the pier where there could be a structural current, as well as we call it the boneyard. There's a whole bunch of rocks in the water. It's very jagged trying to get out. And then at the other end of the beach, husband, wife, and 2 kids, and they're constantly going out. And there's 2 times I was going to run down there because it looked like they were in a situation where if it didn't improve immediately, I need to be already on the move down there. But finally, when we were leaving, and I had sent in the video that led up to it, yeah, ran down the beach. The wife and one child is at the shoreline, and I'm yelling at her, "Get your son out of the water." One child's hanging on to an inner tube. He got separated from the father, who's out beyond the breaking waves now. And I'm paddling out past this child. He's hysterical watching his father drown. And I'm just like, hang on to your tube and float back to shore. And I'm going out to the father, who's now submerging. And the last time he popped up, I was able to get the board right to him. And this is just a boogie board, an ocean style boogie board. I didn't have my surfboard with me. And I've got swim fins on, but I mean, he was wiped out. He was, at the point where he probably wasn't going to come up 1 or 2 more times. Got him back to shore, and I didn't know it until the next day. But the child that was hanging onto the inner tube, he was kind of stuck in an eddy where the waves weren't pushing him to shore. The current wasn't really pulling him out, but he was still kind of far from shore. My son went out with the boogie board and swim fins to get to him and tow him back to shore. But
Mm.
again, it easily could have, you know, turned uh, tragedy, you know, within a few seconds.
Oh, that's incredible.
And these are national parks and state parks that are highest tourist destinations. No lifeguards, no real beach hazard signage, minimal rescue equipment not readily available. And you have to have trained eyes on the water to be able to anticipate and
Yeah.
predict and react in the moment.
Well, you talk about how you've wanted to quit many, many times. Um, uh, I don't even feel like I have to ask the question why you don't after what you just shared. But it does raise another question for me, which is, every drowning that doesn't happen, nobody talks about.
Right.
How do you measure success with the Great Lakes Surf Rescue Project?
Um, so that is true. It's like you can't measure, how many people were rescued or not. So last Tuesday, I was working in Beverly Shores, Indiana. There was high wave activity, again, national parks, no warnings, no beach patrol, no nothing. I probably talked to about 10 parents to explain to them, the dangers that their kids were playing in on the shoreline. And I left from there and I went to Dunbar Beach, did the same thing. I passed Kemmel Beach and then I went to Portage. And by the time I got to Portage, I got a friend in the fire department saying we got a report of a missing 17-year-old at Kemmel Beach, which I just bypassed. Um, at that point in time, there's actually nothing I can do because, going back 20 minutes to that beach wasn't going to, it's a body recovery by that time. It's a body recovery by the time that he sent me a text message about the 17-year-old missing. But I spent a couple hours at Portage, probably talking to, because it honestly, there was a lot more people at Portage. There's a lot more people in the water, and there was groups of people running out on the pier with waves smashing over them, right? So, I probably talked to about 50 people, including parents and teens. And a couple parents said, you know what? I don't want to tell my children this. I want you to tell my children this because they won't listen to us.
Mm.
Right. So they had their 3 children come over and I just explained this is a very, very dangerous situation. We actually have someone missing. So, you don't know. If I would have gone to Kemmel Beach, I might have saved that one, but who knows what would have happened at Portage. It's really kind of hard to assess that. So,
Well, to answer my own question,
yeah,
it sounds like one of the measures of success is the conversation keeps going.
yeah. And even that's kind of unmeasurable when we look at things that we do measure. We measure the numbers of drownings that happen in the Great Lakes every year. We measure the number of presentations and trainings that we do each year. We measure the number of family members that reach out to us and do some work with us. And then we also measure the number of media mentions. So my biggest strong suits is writing and writing press releases. So public relations, media relations, spokesperson, presenter, educating the media on what questions they should be asking what officials. Um, because I've done over 2,000 interviews since I got involved with this, strictly for water safety.
Just Google Dave Benjamin and GLSP. It's
but
GLSRP.
right, and then looking, there's different types of media. So there's newspaper, there's radio, there's TV, and then even within those, there's newspaper, which may be a feature story where you're just a couple of paragraphs, or where you're the lead of the feature story. Same thing with the radio. If you listen to like News Radio 780 WBBM, they just do a couple of clips. I might interview with them for 10 or 15 minutes, but they only played 10 seconds of something I said, and they may recycle some things. But if you can get a live on air interview, that on-air interview might go 5, 10, 15 minutes, depending on people calling in, depending on how interested the radio DJs are. And then when you look at TV news, the same thing, where you're part of a story, or whether you're now invited to an in-studio interview.
Yeah.
And then looking at the larger medias like Inside Edition, Good Morning America, or the Weather Channel. We've kind of become a regular on the Weather Channel and Good Morning America the last 3 years, where every spring they're going to come looking for a story for us to be a part of a feature of.
I have a couple questions to finish with. One is a commonality that I've found in all of these interviews is that one of the things that keeps people going through the difficult times, like you alluded to, is an experience of really being moved by the work that you're doing. And I'm curious if you have something for you, that an experience in all these years that really stands out for you.
I mean, every year there's many, going to national conferences and presenting at conferences and being part of a much larger nationwide effort for drowning prevention. But just like something that's more recent and still really fresh was the man that I rescued on July 24th. His wife has since become Facebook friends with us, follow our page. She's put a couple posts about that incident out. But she posted, just yesterday of her husband coaching his first day coaching baseball for their son, right? The flip side of that is it could be a GoFundMe page for funeral expenses,
Yeah.
right? So something like that, is something that's moving to keep going. Sometimes at the same time,
Yeah.
like some of the family members that we work with, when they first get involved with us, they're grieving. They're going through the emotions of grief, anger, denial, bargaining, acceptance, you know. So there's a common saying is there's empowerment through action over
Mhm.
the circumstances.
That's
So,
wonderful.
so that's like a daily basis
Yeah.
with family members that we work with. But there does come a time when family members say, you know what, there was a point where doing this was healing, and now there's a point where like the more I do this, the more it's like psychologically draining or emotional, that they have to take a step back. And
Yeah.
so there's some people that we've worked with who were became lifesaver of the year for the National Drowning Prevention Alliance. And then a little time goes on and they're like, I need to step back and take some time for myself. And it's completely understandable, but
Yeah.
it's something to, it's like we get the new family members, unfortunately, that we didn't get the message for their family members in time, but they're willing to do something. And then with that, there's coaching all along the way of coaching them to speak to legislators or to speak to the media or to speak to their city council members. Everything is coaching all along the way. And then another, like just a side thing for myself that I've been doing is coaching hockey for the last 6, 7 years for my son and his team. So
Mm. Well,
it's all encompassing.
the other question that I had was for the people that are listening or watching, what what can you offer them to uh if they want to be able to participate in water safety, wherever they may be?
Yeah. So one of the things that we've been leading the conversation for quite some time, and now some of it's starting to come to fruition, is we believe that a water safety school curriculum would be the fastest approach to reach the largest audience in the shortest amount of time that would have the maximum impact. That means having, water safety education from kindergarten, through senior year of high school. So speaking to your schools about water safety education, and having it included in their curriculum. It's standard today in schools that there's fire drills, tornado drills, school shooter drills, even earthquake drills in many states. Earthquake drills in Illinois and Indiana. My kids grew up doing earthquake drills, and there hasn't been a fatal earthquake in my lifetime, but earthquakes get a higher level of priority over water safety. But we really do need water safety education, and it's not just for the Great Lakes, but it's for any body of water. That would be one action that people could take, is speaking to their local schools about having water safety education as part of it. And it doesn't have to be strictly through us. It could be through the American Red Cross. There's other programs out there. We did assist with some Chicago residents that got the Lake Michigan Rescue Equipment Act passed in Illinois to have life rings as well as other rescue equipment on the lakefront. They continued on, and there's a amendment to the education bill that requires water safety education in Illinois for kindergarten through sixth grade. So that is something that's in place now. We need to expand on that, through high school. There's an education bill going through the House in Michigan. We also had the Lake Michigan Rescue Equipment Act passed in Indiana as well, to require life rings and rescue equipment on the lakefront in Indiana. So if people have their local politicians, or if they have the ears of legislators at the statewide level, speaking to them about a meeting that we could talk about water safety and the benefits of all of this. So those are some like immediate actions that people could take for water safety.
Oh, that's great. Dave, you just embody this project. It's really it's just palpable. And I really I just have to tell you, I am really inspired by the depth of your commitment, and the it just is who you are. And um thank you for championing something that other people aren't paying attention to yet is so important and so vital.
Well, thank you very much. And I also have to acknowledge and thank you, because the first time that I was a participant in the self-expression leadership program, you were my coach. And I think I went on to like coach and head coach that at least 9 times, and the self-expression leadership program is a 4-month commitment for each time. So I was just kind of like continuously, in a nonstop coaching role for, I can't even count how many years. But again, it's just everything that was embodied in that program gets embodied in what we do with the Surf Rescue Project.
Ah, just wonderful. Well, thank you. It's really been a pleasure having you, and I just I'm kind of without words. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you too.